Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Sean Sammons. I am the person on the left, the installer for the boiler replacement at Temple Aaron in Trinidad, Colorado. Temple Aaron was built, I believe, in the late 1800s, 1880s, I think. And I don't think initially that it had a steam system. I think the steam system was put in probably very late 1800s or early 1900s, just given the age of some of the radiators. I know some of them were not manufactured until at least 1903, 1905, in that area. So that's going to be my guess for when the system was initially installed. You can see the original boiler on the left there. That kind of brick half wall there is actually the side of the original boiler. It is a big beast, and was initially fired on coal. It was never converted. It still has the old coal chute and coal auger connected to it. This boiler that we're working on demoing right now, I believe, had a date of 1997 on it, and it's a steel tube boiler. Typically has about a maybe 20-year lifespan, and this one was in bad enough shape that it really wasn't worth trying to repair anything. And so the decision was made to replace it. So we're going to put in a brand new cast iron sectional boiler and connect it to the old system and tune everything up, change the air vents and the valves on the radiators, repitch the piping, and make it run like it should, and like it deserves to. So here you can see us just kind of, generally taking everything down, taking it all apart, so we can get it out here, because this thing as it stood and probably weighed about 800 pounds. And the access to this is pretty tough. There was no real good way to carry it out or put it on dollies or anything like that. Whoever got this in here must have had a real fun time, I gotta say. So as you continue watching us just tear this down, I'm gonna kind of run through the basics of steam heating with you, so you have some idea of how this all works. I guess the best place to start is how we measure heat. In North America, in some other parts of the world, we use a unit called the BTU, or British Thermal Unit, and it's the heat required to raise 1 pound of water 1 degree Fahrenheit, which, for those of you who like the metric system, sounds like an atrocious unit, and it kind of is, but it's what I am used to using, so we're going to stick with that for now. So the important thing to realize about steam is that, on a hot water system, if I take 1 pound of water, I run it through some heat emitter, and it drops by 1 degree, I will get 1 BTU of heat into the space. Whereas with steam, if you've ever put a thermometer in a pot of water when you boil it, you'll notice that the temperature goes up and goes up and goes up, and then as soon as the water starts boiling, the temperature stays the same. And the reason for that is that there's what's called latent heat, and it is the heat required for something to undergo a phase change, i.e., liquid to gas in that case. So water has incredibly high latent heat. So if I take that same pound of water and I convert it into steam, and then I condense that steam in a radiator, that 1 pound of water dropping, from just 1 degree maybe from steam back into liquid, I'll get 960 BTUs out of it. So the main agent of heat transfer in a steam system is actually that phase change. It is really not to do with cooling the steam down or anything like that. It has to condense for you to get all that heat back out of it. So this boiler that we're taking apart is what's called a steel tube boiler. You can see all those tubes there. Those are all filled with water, and then the burner sits underneath, and they kind of have a slant to them. So as it starts to boil inside those tubes, it tries to rise out and comes out in the header on the very top. And then once you create steam, it starts flowing through the piping and distributes to all the radiators and condenses, and then runs back and returns back to the boiler. So that's kind of the basics of a steam system. This particular system is known as a one-pipe steam system. There is one pipe connected to each radiator, and that pipe conveys both the steam to the radiator and the condensed liquid water back to the boiler. So in essence, it goes out from the boiler, does a big loop with a bunch of T's coming off the individual radiators, and then comes back into that pipe, that vertical pipe you can see on the left side of the boiler there. That is the return coming back to return the condensate back to the boiler. One of the most important considerations when you're doing any kind of work on a steam system like this, excuse me, is that you need to ensure that when the boiler is under pressure, the pressures involved in a steam system are typically very, very low. In this case, it will be most likely about 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 psi at the absolute most. And what that effectively does when you're trying to return water back into the boiler and you don't have any kind of pump or you don't have any kind of other mechanical means for returning the water back, you have to stack water vertically to provide enough pressure to overcome the boiler pressure. So at the conversion is 2.31 feet of water is equal to 1 psi. So at 2 psi, if I had 2 psi on the boiler, I need a grand total of, well, that'd be 4.61 feet, or about, 4 foot, I don't know, 4'8", let's call it. That would, if that was, okay, so that's the total pressure we need. Now, the end of the steam main does have some leftover pressure from the steam, but not as much as is leaving the boiler. As the steam travels through the pipe, it does lose pressure just due to friction. So when it comes back, you might have, say, 0.5 psi left at the end. So that's about, a little over 1 foot of water column. So now you only need, 3.5 feet or so from the water line, the normal water line in the boiler, to the top of the stacked water in that column. If you don't have that, then the water will start to, if you have not enough vertical height there, then the water will start to flow back into the horizontal section of the main, and you're going to get a lot of banging and a lot of problems with your main air vent at the end. So one of the most important considerations when you're replacing a boiler is to measure that height, figure out where your water line is going to be, and make sure that you have enough height. So in this case, the new boiler I'm putting in actually has a much lower water line than this one, and will work much better than this one in that regard. Now, taking an old boiler out like this can be kind of challenging because these things are not light, and that's the only reason why we're cutting this all apart. And the new boiler is actually even heavier than this because it's not a steel tube boiler, it's a cast iron sectional boiler. And you'll see that in the next video, how difficult it can be to move those around and how heavy they really are. But there's lots of little tricks, and I definitely had help moving the new one in, and glad I did because I don't think I would have been able to do it by myself in any way, shape, or form. But past that, most of this is going to be just me working by myself. There's nothing else really that I needed a ton of help with, so you'll see the progression of this project as we move from taking the old one out to getting the new one in, to the piping, to fixing all the little problems out in the system, replacing vents and radiator valves, repitching the mains so that the condensate can flow correctly back to the boiler, hooking up the gas, tuning the burner. There's a whole lot that goes into this. The other thing I guess I should mention at this point is before any of this began, I went around and measured every radiator in the building to determine the capacity of that radiator, as far as they're rated in essentially what they call a square feet of equivalent direct radiation, or EDR. And essentially it's a measurement of how many pounds of steam an hour that radiator can condense. And you have to size steam systems based on, especially one-pipe steam systems, based on the size of the radiators. You can't really base it on the heat loss of the structure, because if you try and size it based on the heat loss, there's only going to be so much steam that's created. Chances are very good that the radiators are oversized for the space, so you will not actually create enough steam to fill all the radiators, and that will lead to uneven heating and a whole host of other problems. So when you do steam, you have to size based on the radiators. So I went around, did a radiator survey, and measured every radiator, got the ratings out of an old book that I have that is just a big, huge catalog of every old radiator. Gives the equivalent direct radiation ratings for everything, and sized the new boiler based on that and some other considerations like the altitude we're at, which is about 6,000 feet, and also the pickup factor, which is kind of a little extra you add based on the size and length of the piping. And this is all going to be insulated when this is done, so that decreases that pickup factor. But yeah, the main considerations here are, take your time, be diligent about design, and make sure that you're doing everything to the book, and have the experience to know what you need to know before you start. So anyways, I guess that is the first video where you got to see us just completely tear a boiler down and haul it outside. Hope you stick around to watch the rest of these videos. I hope some of you are interested in the general process, and if you're interested in the building, I encourage you to go visit the website at templeaaron.org. And if you have any questions, email me at templeaaronboilerreplacement@gmail.com. Hope you have a good one. Thanks.